Maria Santos stood barely 5 feet tall in her worn sneakers, her small frame often disappearing in crowds. At 24, she had grown used to the whispers that followed her wherever she went. Too small, they would say. Too weak, others would add with dismissive shakes of their heads. But Maria carried something inside her that no one could see. A fire that burned brighter than any flame she would ever face. Growing up in the tough neighborhoods of East Los Angeles, Maria learned early that size didn't determine strength. Her father, a construction worker with calloused hands and a gentle heart, had taught her that courage came from within. "Mija," he would tell her as they sat on their apartment's front steps, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "The biggest heroes often come in the smallest packages. Remember that." Her mother, Rosa, worked double shifts at the local diner, her apron always smelling of coffee and hope. Despite their struggles, the Santos family never lost their spirit. They were the kind of people who shared their last tortilla with a hungry neighbor, and who believed that kindness could change the world, one person at a time. When Maria announced her intention to become a firefighter, the reaction was swift and predictable. Her high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Peterson, peered at her over thick glasses and suggested she consider more suitable careers. "Have you thought about teaching? Or maybe nursing? Those would be perfect for someone like you," she said, her voice dripping with what she probably thought was kindness but felt like condescension to Maria. Even her closest friends struggled to hide their doubts. "Maria, be realistic," said her best friend Carmen during lunch one day. "Those guys are huge. They carry people twice your size out of burning buildings. How are you going to do that?" The question hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. But Maria had witnessed something that changed her life forever when she was 16. A fire had broken out in the apartment building next to theirs. She watched from her bedroom window as firefighters rushed in and out, carrying people to safety. But it wasn't the big, muscular firefighters who caught her attention. It was a smaller woman, moving with precision and determination, who had crawled through a window too small for her larger colleagues and emerged with a crying baby. That night, Maria knew her calling. She began researching firefighting programs, studying the requirements and preparing her body and mind for the challenge ahead. She started running every morning before dawn, her small feet pounding the pavement while the city still slept. She lifted weights at the community center, her determination growing stronger with each rep. The physical training was brutal. Maria's body ached in ways she never knew possible. Blisters formed on her hands from rope climbing. Her lungs burned as she ran up flight after flight of stairs carrying heavy equipment. But she never complained, never gave up, never let the doubt in other people's eyes become doubt in her own heart. At the fire academy, she was the smallest recruit by far. The other candidates towered over her like redwood trees, their broad shoulders and muscular frames making her feel like a child playing dress-up in adult clothes. During the first day of orientation, she heard the snickers, saw the eye rolls, felt the weight of their judgment. "Look at that," whispered Jake Morrison, a former college football player whose biceps were bigger than Maria's thighs. "Did someone's little sister get lost?" The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. But Maria kept her chin up and her eyes forward. The instructors weren't much better initially. Captain Williams, a grizzled veteran with 30 years on the force, looked at Maria's application and shook his head. "I admire your spirit, Santos, but this isn't about spirit. This is about being able to carry a 200-pound man down a ladder while wearing 60 pounds of gear and breathing through a mask. Can you do that?" "I can learn to do that, sir," Maria replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Learning and doing are two different things," he said, closing her file. "We'll see." The physical tests were designed to weed out the weak. Maria struggled with some of the strength-based challenges, but she found ways to compensate. Where others used brute force, she used technique. Where they relied on size, she relied on speed and agility. She studied body mechanics, learned leverage, and discovered that intelligence could often overcome physical limitations. Her strategy during the ladder climb test amazed everyone. While other recruits muscled their way up with heavy equipment, Maria distributed the weight differently, used her lower center of gravity to her advantage, and completed the course faster than recruits twice her size. The stunned silence that followed was music to her ears, but acceptance didn't come easily. Even when Maria proved herself in training exercises, the doubts persisted. Sure, she's good in training, she heard one recruit say. But what happens when there's real fire, real smoke, real people depending on her? That's when size matters. Maria absorbed every criticism, every doubt, every sideways glance and transformed them into fuel for her determination. She studied fire behavior with the intensity of a scientist, memorized building layouts like an architect, and learned rescue techniques with the dedication of a surgeon. If she couldn't outmuscle them, she would outsmart them. If she couldn't overpower the challenges, she would outwork them. Her breaking point came during a particularly difficult training scenario. The recruits were practicing search and rescue in a smoke-filled building when Jake Morrison got into trouble. His air supply was running low and panic had set in. The larger recruits couldn't navigate the narrow crawlspace where he was trapped. Without hesitation, Maria dropped to her hands and knees and crawled into the tight space. Her small size, which had been the subject of so much ridicule, suddenly became her greatest asset. She found Jake, calmed him down, and guided him to safety using breathing techniques and spatial awareness that the bigger recruits hadn't mastered. That day, something shifted. Not completely. There were still doubters, still whispers, still those who believed that firefighting was a job for big, strong men. But Maria had proven that heroism wasn't measured in inches or pounds. It was measured in courage, skill, and the willingness to put others before yourself. As graduation day approached, Maria Santos stood taller than her 5-foot frame had ever allowed her to stand before. She wore her uniform with pride, knowing that every thread had been earned through sweat, determination, and an unshakable belief that size was just a number. But heart was everything. Little did anyone know that very soon, Maria would face her first real test and in doing so, would redefine what it meant to be a hero in the eyes of everyone who had ever doubted her. Maria's first assignment was to Engine Company 19, stationed in one of the busiest districts in the city. The firehouse was a red brick building that had seen decades of heroes come and go. Walking through those doors on her first day, Maria felt the weight of history and expectation pressing down on her small shoulders. Captain Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, welcomed her to the team. "Santos, I've heard good things about your academy performance," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "But this is the real world now. Stay sharp, stay humble, and always remember that every call could be the one that tests everything you've learned." The crew of Engine 19 was a mixed bag of personalities. There was Tommy "Tank" Mitchell, a gentle giant who could bench press a small car but who collected butterflies in his spare time. Sarah Chen was the only other woman on the crew, a 10-year veteran who had fought her own battles against skepticism and had earned her place through sheer competence and grit. Then there was Lieutenant Brad Cooper, a man whose skepticism about Maria was written all over his weathered face. He had requested a different assignment when he learned about Maria's placement, arguing that the district was too dangerous for someone still learning the ropes. His resistance to her presence was polite, but unmistakable. "Listen, Santos," he said during her first week. "I'm sure you're a fine firefighter, but out here, we don't have time for training exercises. When that bell rings, people's lives depend on us making the right call instantly. No pressure, but failure isn't an option." Maria understood the subtext. She was being told that she was a liability, that her presence put others at risk. But she had faced this attitude before and knew that words wouldn't change minds, only actions would. Her first month was a series of routine calls. Kitchen fires in apartment buildings, car accidents on busy intersections, false alarms at office buildings. Each call was an opportunity for Maria to prove herself. But they were also relatively straightforward situations that didn't truly test her abilities. The other firefighters watched her carefully during these calls. She noticed Tommy timing her as she connected hoses, saw Sarah evaluating her technique as she ventilated roofs, felt Lieutenant Cooper's eyes on her every move, waiting for a mistake that would validate his doubts. During downtime at the station, Maria threw herself into learning everything she could about their district. She memorized building layouts, studied traffic patterns, learned about the people they served. While others watched television or played cards, Maria pored over maps and building plans, understanding that knowledge could save lives. "You don't have to prove yourself every minute of every day," Sarah told her one evening as they cleaned equipment after a routine call. "I went through the same thing when I started. Everyone's waiting for you to fail, but you can't let that pressure consume you. I'm not trying to prove anything, Maria replied, polishing a helmet until it gleamed. I'm just trying to be ready. Ready for what? Whatever comes next. What came next was a lesson in how quickly things could go wrong. They responded to what seemed like a simple medical call, an elderly man having chest pain in a second-floor apartment. But when they arrived, they discovered the man had been cooking when the heart attack struck. A pot had overturned, igniting the kitchen curtains. The fire was small but spreading, and the man was unconscious on the floor. The narrow staircase made it difficult for the larger firefighters to maneuver with their equipment, but Maria slipped past them, her compact size allowing her to navigate the tight space quickly. She found the man surrounded by smoke, his breathing shallow but steady. Rather than attempting to carry him out herself, she called for backup and began administering first aid, while simultaneously working to contain the fire with a small extinguisher. By the time Tommy and Lieutenant Cooper reached her, she had stabilized the victim and prevented the fire from spreading beyond the kitchen. Nice work, Santos, Cooper said grudgingly as they loaded the man into the ambulance. You kept your head and used your resources. That's good firefighting. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was progress. Maria felt a small measure of satisfaction, knowing that she had performed well under pressure, but she also knew that one successful call didn't erase months of skepticism. The real test of her acceptance came during a community event at a local school. Engine 19 was participating in Fire Safety Week, demonstrating equipment and teaching children about fire prevention. Maria loved these events, the opportunity to connect with the community and inspire the next generation. As she demonstrated how to properly use a fire extinguisher, a little girl approached her. The child couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. Are you really a firefighter? The girl asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. I am, Maria replied, kneeling down to the child's level. I help people when there are fires or emergencies. But you're so small, the girl said with the brutal honesty that only children possess. How can you save people who are bigger than you? Before Maria could answer, Lieutenant Cooper appeared beside them. She braced herself for another lecture about her limitations, but instead he surprised her. Size isn't what makes someone strong, he told the little girl. This firefighter has one of the biggest hearts I've ever seen, and that's what really matters. She works harder than anyone else to make sure she can help people, no matter how big or small they are. Maria looked up at Cooper in surprise. He gave her a slight nod, not quite a smile, but something approaching respect. When I grow up, the little girl announced, I want to be a firefighter just like her. That night back at the station, the dynamic felt different. The conversations included Maria more naturally. The jokes weren't at her expense, and when Lieutenant Cooper assigned tasks, he treated her like any other member of the team. You know, Tank said as they sat around the kitchen table sharing a meal. I was wrong about you, Santos. I thought your size would be a problem, but you found ways to make it work for you. That's good firefighting. Sarah smiled from across the table. It's not about how big you are on the outside, she said. It's about how big you are on the inside. Maria felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the firehouse's heating system. For the first time since joining Engine 19, she felt like she truly belonged. But as she would soon discover, belonging was just the beginning. The real test of who she was as a firefighter was still to come. The alarm bell that would change everything was still days away, but Maria Santos was ready. She had proven herself in small ways, earned respect through dedication and skill, and built the confidence she would need when the moment came to show the world what a real firefighter looked like. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Maria had been sleeping deeply in her bunk at the firehouse when the alarm shattered the silence. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio with urgency that made everyone's blood run cold. Engine 19, Truck 12, Battalion 5. Respond to structure fire at Riverside Senior Living Center, 1247 Oak Street. Multiple residents trapped, heavy smoke showing. Maria's feet hit the floor before she was fully awake. Around her, the other firefighters were already moving with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this dance hundreds of times before. But something about this call felt different. The address sent a chill down her spine. Riverside was the largest senior care facility in their district, home to over 200 elderly residents. As they suited up, Captain Rodriguez briefed them on what little they knew. 3-story building, mostly elderly residents with limited mobility. First units on scene report heavy smoke from the second floor. Possible fire in the east wing. This could be bad, people. Lieutenant Cooper's usual calm demeanor showed cracks of concern as he checked his equipment one more time. Tank's jokes were absent as he hefted his gear. Even Sarah, normally unflappable, moved with tense urgency. The ride to Riverside took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. Through the truck's windows, Maria could see the orange glow against the night sky growing brighter as they approached. When they rounded the corner onto Oak Street, the full scope of the emergency hit them like a physical blow. Flames were shooting from multiple second-floor windows. Thick black smoke poured from the building's east wing, and the acrid smell of burning plastic and electronics filled the air. Elderly residents in wheelchairs and using walkers were gathered in the parking lot, many still in their nightgowns and robes, shivering in the cold November air. But what made Maria's heart sink was the number of people outside versus what should have been inside. Riverside housed over 200 residents, but she could see maybe 50 people in the parking lot. That meant at least 150 people were still in the building. Battalion Chief Patricia Wells was already coordinating the response, her voice cutting through the chaos with clear, decisive commands. Rodriguez, take your crew and start search and rescue on the first floor. We've got confirmed reports of residents trapped in the dining area and several rooms in the west wing. As they approached the building, Maria could feel the heat radiating from the structure even from 50 feet away. The smoke was so thick that visibility was nearly zero once they entered. She checked her breathing apparatus one more time, making sure her mask was secure and her air supply was full. Stay together, Captain Rodriguez shouted over the roar of the fire. Standard search pattern. Santos, you're with Cooper. Tank and Chen, take the west corridor. We work room by room, fast but thorough. The interior of Riverside was a maze of corridors, common areas, and individual rooms. The smoke was so dense that even with their powerful flashlights, visibility was limited to just a few feet. The heat was oppressive, and Maria could feel sweat already starting to drip inside her helmet. She and Lieutenant Cooper began their search in the dining area, where the night staff had reported several residents might be trapped. The room was filled with overturned wheelchairs and walkers, evidence of the panicked evacuation that had taken place when the fire alarms first sounded. Over here, Cooper called out, his voice muffled by his breathing mask. He had found an elderly woman who had fallen trying to escape. She was conscious but disoriented, her breathing labored from smoke inhalation. Ma'am, we're here to help you, Maria said, kneeling beside the woman. What's your name? Dorothy, the woman whispered. Dorothy Mason. I couldn't keep up with the others. My legs just gave out. Cooper was already calling for a stretcher team, but Maria could see in his eyes what she was thinking too. Every minute counted, and they couldn't wait for backup to arrive. The fire was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated. I can carry her, Maria said, already moving to lift Dorothy. Santos, she's got to weigh at least 140. That's almost your body weight. I can do it, Maria insisted. And she could. All those months of training, all those doubts about her size had prepared her for exactly this moment. She used proper lifting technique, distributing Dorothy's weight across her body, and began moving toward the exit. The journey back to the lobby felt endless. Dorothy was heavier than Maria had estimated, and the smoke was getting thicker. But Maria's smaller stature actually worked to her advantage. She could navigate under the worst of the smoke, where the air was cleaner and visibility was better. You're going to be okay, Dorothy, Maria kept repeating, as much for her own encouragement as for the elderly woman's. We're almost out. Just hold on. When they finally emerged from the building, the medical team immediately took Dorothy to a waiting ambulance. Maria took a moment to catch her breath and check her air supply. She was down to about 60%, which meant she had time for one, maybe two more rescue attempts before she'd need to refill her tank. Good work. Santos, Lieutenant Cooper said as they prepared to go back inside. But that was the easy one. The real trapped victims are going to be on the upper floors, and the fire's getting worse. He was right. Reports from other teams painted an increasingly grim picture. The fire had spread to multiple floors, and the building's old ventilation system was actually helping the flames move faster through the structure. Worse, the elevators were out of service, meaning that residents who couldn't use the stairs were essentially trapped. Rodriguez to all teams. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over their radios. We've got reports of approximately 15 residents trapped on the second floor east wing. The stairwells are compromised and the fire department ladders can't reach some of the windows. We need creative solutions, people. Maria looked up at the second floor windows, many of which were now glowing with the orange light of flames. She could see faces pressed against some of the glass, people who were trapped, waiting for help that might not come in time through conventional means. That's when she noticed something that the other firefighters had missed. On the east side of the building, there was a narrow service corridor that connected to an exterior fire escape. The passage was too narrow for most firefighters to navigate while wearing full gear, but Maria realized she might be able to make it through. "Lieutenant," she called to Cooper, "I think I found another way to reach the second floor." "What are you thinking, Santos?" Maria pointed to the service corridor.
"That passage connects to the fire escape on the east side."
"I could get through there and access the trapped residents from a different angle." Cooper studied the narrow opening, then looked at Maria. For a moment she thought he was going to tell her it was too dangerous, that they needed to stick to standard procedures. But then his expression changed. "Do it," he said. "But Santos, you're not going alone. I'll coordinate from down here and guide other teams to meet you up there. And if it gets too dangerous, you get out immediately. That's an order." "Understood," Maria replied, already checking her equipment and mentally preparing for what could be the most important rescue of her career. As she approached the narrow service corridor, Maria Santos knew that the next few minutes would define not just her career, but potentially the lives of dozens of people who were counting on her. Her size, which had been the subject of so much doubt and criticism, was about to become the very thing that made the impossible rescue possible. The service corridor was even tighter than Maria had anticipated. She had to remove some of her larger equipment and crawl on her hands and knees to navigate the narrow space. The walls pressed in on both sides, and she could feel the heat from the fire growing stronger as she moved deeper into the building. Her breathing was steady and controlled, despite the challenging conditions. All those hours of training in confined spaces were paying off now. While other firefighters might feel claustrophobic in such tight quarters, Maria felt oddly at home. This was exactly the kind of situation where her smaller size became a superpower, rather than a limitation. The corridor was filled with pipes and electrical conduits that scraped against her helmet and breathing apparatus. Behind her, she dragged a rope that would serve as a lifeline and a way for other rescuers to follow her path if needed. The sound of her own breathing through the mask seemed unnaturally loud in the enclosed space. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 minutes, Maria reached the fire escape access door. It was hot to the touch, indicating fire on the other side, but not so hot that it was immediately dangerous. She radioed her position to Lieutenant Cooper. "I'm at the fire escape access east side, second floor. The door is warm but passable. I'm going to make entry and assess the situation." "Copy that, Santos. Truck 12 is positioning to support you from the exterior. Be careful in there." Maria opened the door slowly and immediately smoke poured out. But through the haze she could see something that made her heart race with both hope and terror. There were people here. At least a dozen elderly residents who had become trapped when the main stairwells filled with smoke. They were huddled in a small seating area near the fire escape, but the external stairs had been damaged by falling debris and were no longer safe to use. The residents were conscious but frightened, many coughing violently from smoke inhalation. "Everyone, I'm Maria with the fire department," she called out as she entered the area. "We're here to get you out safely." An elderly man with silver hair and kind eyes, despite the terror in them, spoke up. "Thank God you're here. We've been trapped for 20 minutes. Harold over there has a heart condition and Mrs. Kim is having trouble breathing." Maria quickly assessed the situation. 15 people total, ranging in age from what looked like early 70s to mid-90s. Several were using wheelchairs or walkers. The fire escape was unusable, and the main corridor leading to the stairwells was completely blocked by fire and debris. "Santos, what's your status?" Cooper's voice crackled over the radio. "I've got 15 people trapped on the second floor east wing. The fire escape is damaged. I need another way out." There was a pause before Cooper responded. "We're working on it. The ladder trucks are trying to position for window rescue, but it's going to take time." "Can you hold your position?" Maria looked around at the frightened faces of the residents. Harold, the man with the heart condition, was looking pale and sweaty. Mrs. Kim was indeed having difficulty breathing, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Time was not on their side. Negative on holding position, she radioed back. I have medical emergencies developing. I'm going to need to find another route. That's when Maria noticed something that sparked an idea. At the end of the corridor was a service elevator that was used for maintenance and food service. It was smaller than the main passenger elevators, but it might still be operational since it was on a different electrical system. Is anyone familiar with the service elevator at the end of this hall? She asked the group. A woman in a floral nightgown raised her hand. I'm Betty Rodriguez. I used to work in the kitchen here before I retired. That elevator goes down to the loading dock on the ground floor. But during a fire it should automatically shut down for safety, Maria finished. But if the electrical system is still intact, there might be a manual override. It was a risk. Using an elevator during a fire went against every protocol she'd been taught. But looking at the deteriorating condition of some of the residents, Maria realized that sometimes you had to break the rules to save lives. She made her way to the service elevator and found the control panel. Her training in building systems paid off as she located the manual override switch. The elevator car was sitting on the ground floor, but she could call it up if the shaft was clear. Santos, what are you doing? Lieutenant Cooper's voice carried a note of concern. I found a service elevator. I'm going to see if I can get it operational. Negative. Elevators during structure fires are absolutely forbidden. You know that. I know the rules, Lieutenant, but I also know these people won't survive much longer up here. Give me 2 minutes to assess if it's viable. Maria pressed the call button, holding her breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she heard the mechanical whir of motors engaging, and the elevator began to rise. When it arrived, she opened the doors and examined the shaft with her flashlight. The elevator well was clear of smoke and flames. The fire hadn't spread to this section yet. The shaft is clear, she radioed to Cooper. I can get these people down safely. Santos, I can't authorize that. It's too dangerous. Maria looked back at the 15 frightened faces depending on her. Harold was now sitting on the floor, his breathing labored. Mrs. Kim was leaning heavily against the wall. The smoke was getting thicker and she could hear the fire spreading closer to their location. Lieutenant, with all due respect, I'm not asking for authorization anymore. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. These people will die if they stay here, and there's no other way out. The silence on the radio stretched for several seconds before Cooper responded. Do it. But Santos, if that elevator gets stuck or the power fails, we might not be able to get you out. Understood. Maria began organizing the evacuation. The service elevator was small. She could only take 3 or 4 people at a time, which meant multiple trips into increasingly dangerous conditions. But it was their only viable option. Okay, everyone, listen carefully, she addressed the group. We're going to use the service elevator to get you out. I can only take a few people at a time, so we're going to prioritize those who need medical attention first. She helped Harold and Mrs. Kim into the elevator first, along with another elderly woman who was showing signs of shock. I'll be right back for the rest of you, she promised the remaining 12 people. The ride down felt like it took forever, though it was probably only 30 seconds. When the doors opened on the ground floor, medical personnel and other firefighters were waiting. They immediately took charge of the 3 residents while Maria prepared for her second trip. How many more? Asked Tank, who had positioned himself at the elevator to assist. 12, Maria replied, already stepping back into the elevator car. And I need to hurry. The fire is spreading toward their location. As the elevator rose for the second time, Maria's radio crackled with updates from around the building. The news wasn't good. The fire had spread faster than anyone had anticipated, and several sections of the building were being written off as too dangerous for interior operations. When she reached the second floor again, the situation had deteriorated noticeably. The smoke was much thicker, and she could see flames beginning to appear at the far end of the corridor. The remaining 12 residents were still there, but their fear had escalated to near panic. It's okay, Maria called out as she approached. I'm back. We're going to get everyone out. But as she helped the next group of 4 residents into the elevator, she realized that time was running out faster than she had calculated. At this rate, with 2 more trips needed, the fire would likely reach their location before she could evacuate everyone. That's when Maria Santos made the decision that would define her as a firefighter and as a person. Instead of taking the safer approach of multiple small groups, she was going to try to fit everyone remaining into the next 2 trips, even if it meant overloading the elevator and putting herself at greater risk. Change of plans. she announced to the waiting residents. We're all going out together. Maria looked at the 12 remaining residents and made a quick mental calculation. The service elevator was rated for 8 people maximum, but these were mostly elderly individuals who weighed less than average adults. More importantly, she could see flames beginning to lick at the edges of the corridor behind them. There wasn't time for another round trip. Everyone who can stand needs to help someone who can't, she announced with calm authority that surprised even herself. We're going to make this work, but I need everyone to stay calm and work together. Betty Rodriguez, the former kitchen worker, stepped forward. I can help organize. I know how people work together in this place. Her voice was shaky but determined. Within minutes, they had arranged themselves efficiently in the small elevator car. Those in wheelchairs were positioned first, with standing residents filling every available space. Maria squeezed herself into the corner, her small frame allowing precious extra room that a larger firefighter couldn't have provided. Hold on to each other, she instructed as she pressed the ground floor button. This might be a tight ride, but we're going to make it. The elevator groaned under the weight as it began to descend. Maria held her breath, knowing that if the car got stuck between floors, they would all be trapped. The mechanical sounds seemed different this time, strained and uncertain. But slowly, steadily, they descended. Halfway down, the lights flickered. Maria felt her heart skip a beat, but the elevator continued moving. She looked around at the faces surrounding her, fear mixed with hope, terror balanced by trust in her ability to get them out safely. Almost there, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring them or herself. When the doors finally opened on the ground floor, the medical team and firefighters waiting there stared in amazement. 12 people emerged from an elevator designed for 8, all alive, all conscious, all ready to receive the medical attention they needed. Santos. That was incredible, Tank said as he helped the last resident out of the elevator. But please tell me that's everyone. Maria checked her mental count one more time. That's everyone from the East Wing, 2nd floor. But Lieutenant, we need to check the 3rd floor. There might be more people up there. Cooper was waiting for her as she emerged from the elevator. His expression was a mixture of relief and concern. Santos, your air supply has got to be getting low. You've been inside for over 30 minutes. She checked her gauge. He was right. She was down to about 20%, which meant maybe 10 more minutes of air. But the job wasn't finished. I can do one more search, she said. The 3rd floor hasn't been fully cleared. Negative, Cooper replied firmly. You've already saved 19 people tonight. That's enough heroics for one firefighter. But even as he spoke, a report came over the radio that changed everything. Another team had discovered that the 3rd floor wasn't empty as they had originally thought. The overnight staff had miscounted during the evacuation. There were at least 8 more residents trapped on the top floor, and the main stairwells were now completely impassable. The fire has reached the 2nd floor ceiling, came the report from Battalion Chief Wells. We're looking at structural collapse within the next 15 to 20 minutes. Any personnel still inside need to evacuate immediately. Maria looked up at the 3rd floor windows, where she could now see faces pressed against the glass. 8 more people who needed her help. 8 more lives hanging in the balance. I'm going back up, she announced, already checking her remaining equipment. Santos, that's an order to stand down, Cooper said. You're low on air, you're exhausted, and the building is about to collapse. Lieutenant, those people don't have 15 minutes, and that service elevator is the only way to reach them now. Captain Rodriguez joined the conversation, having just arrived from coordinating other rescue efforts. What's the situation? 8 more residents on the 3rd floor, Cooper explained quickly. Santos wants to go back up, but she's low on air and the building's compromised. Rodriguez looked at Maria, then at the 3rd floor windows where desperate faces could still be seen. Can the ladder trucks reach them? Negative, there came a voice over the radio. The aerial ladders can't get the right angle because of the fire escape debris, and the interior stairs are completely blocked now. Maria stepped forward. Captain, I know the building layout better than anyone now. I've been through that service corridor twice. I can get up there and I can get those people down. With what air supply? You've got maybe 10 minutes left. Then I better work fast. Rodriguez studied her face for a long moment. Around them, the chaos of the fire scene continued. Water spraying, radios crackling, medical teams treating the rescued residents. But in that moment, it felt like everything focused down to this one decision. Santos, this goes against every safety protocol we have. If something goes wrong up there, Captain, with respect, I didn't become a firefighter to follow protocols when people are dying. I became a firefighter to save lives. Sarah Chen appeared at Maria's side. If she's going up, she's not going alone. I'll take a fresh air tank and back up her operation. The service corridor is too narrow for 2 people in full gear, Maria pointed out. Then I'll position at the stairwell and provide support, Sarah insisted. Nobody does this alone. Cooper looked between them, then made a decision that would haunt him if things went wrong, but that he knew was right. Do it. But Santos, you get those people to the elevator and you get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Fast and efficient. Understood. Maria quickly swapped out her nearly empty air tank for a fresh one. She checked her equipment one more time, knowing that this trip would test every skill she had learned and every ounce of courage she possessed. As she entered the building for what she hoped would be the final time that night, Maria could feel the structure groaning around her. The heat was more intense now, and she could see that the fire had spread much further than when she had last been inside. The service corridor was now filled with smoke, making navigation even more challenging. She crawled through the narrow space, feeling the walls heating up around her. Her radio crackled with updates from outside, but she tried to block out everything except the task ahead of her. When she reached the 3rd floor, the situation was worse than she had feared. The 8 remaining residents were trapped in a small recreation room at the end of a corridor that was rapidly filling with smoke and flame. The service elevator was still operational, but she could see that the fire was very close to reaching the electrical systems. Everyone. I'm Maria with the fire department, she called out as she entered the recreation room. We need to move right now. The 8 residents, 6 women and 2 men, all appearing to be in their 80s or 90s, looked at her with a mixture of relief and terror. Unlike the previous group, several of these people were bedridden or using mobility equipment that wouldn't fit in the small service elevator. We can't all fit in that tiny elevator, said one woman, pointing to the service elevator doors. Some of us can barely walk. Maria assessed the situation quickly. She was right. There was no way to fit everyone in the elevator with their wheelchairs and walkers. But there might be another way. We're going to have to leave the mobility equipment here, Maria announced. Anyone who can walk, even with assistance, will walk. Anyone who can't walk will be carried. We're going to make this work because we have to. The residents looked uncertain, but they began following her instructions. 2 of the women were able to walk with assistance from the others. 1 man could stand but needed support, but 3 residents, including a woman who appeared to be over 90 and was barely conscious, would need to be physically carried. This is going to be tight, Maria radioed to Cooper. I've got 8 people, but 3 need to be carried. I'm going to need multiple trips. How much time do you need? Maria looked around at the spreading fire and calculated. 2 trips, maybe 3 minutes each. But, Lieutenant, I don't think we have 6 minutes. Then you better find a way to do it in 1. Maria looked at the 8 frightened faces around her and made a decision that would either save them all or doom them all. She was going to attempt something that had never been tried before, evacuating 8 people in a service elevator designed for 4, with 3 of them unable to support their own weight. Everyone listen to me very carefully, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority despite her small stature. We are all going to fit in that elevator, and we are all going to survive this night. But I need everyone to do exactly what I say when I say it, without question. Can you do that? 8 elderly heads nodded in unison, their trust in her complete despite having known her for less than 5 minutes. Then let's go home. Maria organized the group with the precision of a military commander and the compassion of a nurse. The 2 women who could walk with assistance were positioned at the back of the elevator. The man who could stand but needed support was placed in one corner where he could lean against the walls. The 3 residents who couldn't support their own weight were carefully arranged in the remaining space. Mrs. Patterson, Maria said to the barely conscious 90-year-old woman, I'm going to hold you during the ride down. Mr. Chen and Mrs. Williams, you'll be supported by the others. Everyone else needs to hold on to someone. The arrangement defied every safety regulation about elevator capacity, but Maria's smaller size allowed for configurations that wouldn't have been possible with a larger rescuer. She positioned herself so that she could support Mrs. Patterson while still reaching the elevator controls. This is crazy, whispered one of the women as they squeezed into the impossibly tight space. Crazy is what saves lives sometimes, Maria replied. Pressing the ground floor button, the elevator groaned ominously as it began to descend, carrying nearly double its rated capacity. Maria held her breath, feeling Mrs. Patterson's frail body against her chest, listening to the labored breathing of the others around her. The mechanical sounds from the elevator were different now, stressed, uncertain, pushed beyond its limits. Halfway down, the car shuddered and stopped. For a terrifying moment, they hung suspended between floors while the building burned around them. Maria's radio crackled with urgent voices, but she couldn't reach it to respond. She was using both hands to support Mrs. Patterson and couldn't risk moving in the cramped space. "We're stuck," someone whispered, and Maria could hear the panic beginning to rise in voices around her. "We're not stuck," she said firmly, though her heart was pounding. "The elevator is just recalibrating. These old systems sometimes pause when they're carrying extra weight. Give it a moment." She wasn't sure if that was true, but she needed to keep everyone calm. In the confined space, panic could be as deadly as the fire itself. She could feel sweat running down her face inside her mask, and her air supply gauge was showing dangerously low levels. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, the elevator lurched back to life and continued descending. Maria offered a silent prayer to whatever force might be listening. "Almost there," she whispered, as much to herself as to the others. "Just a few more seconds." When the doors finally opened on the ground floor, the scene that greeted them was chaos. The entire emergency response team was positioned around the elevator, and Maria could see the relief flood across Lieutenant Cooper's face when he saw all 8 residents emerge, alive. Medical personnel immediately took charge of Mrs. Patterson and the other 2 residents who had needed to be carried. The remaining 5 were quickly escorted to waiting ambulances for evaluation and treatment for smoke inhalation. "Santos, report!" Captain Rodriguez called out as Maria stepped out of the elevator last. "All residents evacuated from the 3rd floor. That's everyone," she said, pulling off her breathing mask. "The fresh air tasted like victory." "Outstanding work," Rodriguez replied. "Now get checked by the medics and get some rest. You've done enough for one night." But even as the medical team examined her for smoke inhalation and exhaustion, Maria's attention was drawn to the building behind them. The fire had spread to engulf most of the 2nd and 3rd floors, and she could see that the structural integrity was severely compromised. If she had waited even 5 more minutes to begin the final rescue, the service elevator would have been unusable. Tank approached her as the medics finished their examination. "Santos, I owe you an apology. Actually, I owe you a lot more than that. What you did tonight, I've never seen anything like it." "We all did it tonight," Maria replied. "This was a team effort." "No," said Lieutenant Cooper, who had been quietly observing from nearby. "This was you. Your size, your determination, your refusal to give up on people. You saved 27 lives tonight, Santos. 27 people are going home to their families because you were brave enough to do what others couldn't do." As the first light of dawn began to creep across the sky, Maria looked back at the Riverside Senior Living Center. The building was a total loss. The fire had consumed most of the structure, and what remained would have to be demolished. But everyone inside had survived. Every single resident had been evacuated safely. The local news crews had arrived and were setting up their equipment to cover the story. Maria watched them with a mixture of exhaustion and amusement. She knew that by tomorrow there would be headlines about the miracle at Riverside and the little firefighter who could. Sarah Chen sat down beside her on the back bumper of engine 19. "You know they're going to want to interview you, right? This is going to be a big story." "I just want to go home and sleep for about 12 hours, Maria replied, but she was smiling. "Not going to happen," Sarah laughed. "Battalion Chief Wells is already talking about commendations, and Captain Rodriguez is grinning like he just won the lottery." As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Rodriguez approached them. "Santos, I just got off the phone with the fire chief. He wants to see you this afternoon. There's going to be some official recognition for what happened here tonight." "Captain, I was just doing my job." "No, you were doing something extraordinary, and sometimes extraordinary deserves to be recognized." As the morning progressed and the scene was secured, Maria found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. All the doubts, all the criticism, all the times people had suggested she find a more suitable career. It had all led to this night when her unique abilities had made the impossible possible. The 8 residents she had rescued in that final, desperate elevator ride were all stable and recovering at local hospitals. Mrs. Patterson, despite her age and frail condition, was expected to make a full recovery. The other 26 people she had helped evacuate throughout the night were also doing well. But perhaps more importantly, Maria Santos had proven something that went far beyond her own abilities. She had shown that heroism came in all sizes, that courage wasn't measured in inches or pounds, and that sometimes the most unlikely people were exactly the right people for the job. As Engine 19 finally returned to the station as the sun rose over the city, Maria knew that her life as a firefighter had fundamentally changed. The doubts about her size and abilities wouldn't disappear overnight, but they would never again define her. She had faced the ultimate test and not just passed it, she had exceeded every expectation. The little girl at the fire safety demonstration had said she wanted to be a firefighter just like Maria. Now Maria realized that she had become the kind of firefighter worth emulating, not because she was big and strong, but because she was determined, skilled, and willing to risk everything to save others. That was what being a real firefighter meant. 6 months after the Riverside fire, Maria Santos stood in the dress uniform of the Metropolitan Fire Department, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of everyone in the packed auditorium. The mayor was preparing to present her with the Medal of Valor, the department's highest honor for heroism in the line of duty. The ceremony was attended by hundreds of people, fellow firefighters, city officials, and many of the residents she had rescued that November night. Mrs. Patterson, now fully recovered, sat in the front row wearing her best dress and beaming with pride. "Firefighter Santos," the mayor announced, "your actions on November 15th exemplify the very best of our fire department and our city. Your courage, determination, and selfless devotion to duty saved 27 lives and demonstrated that heroism comes in many forms." As Maria stepped forward to receive the medal, she caught sight of her parents in the audience. Her father, still in his work clothes from the construction site, was crying openly. Her mother clutched a tissue in one hand and waved with the other. The applause was thunderous, but Maria's mind drifted back to the journey that had brought her here. She thought about Mrs. Peterson, her high school counselor, who had suggested teaching would be more suitable. She wondered what the woman would think seeing her now. After the ceremony, Maria was surrounded by reporters asking questions about her experience, but the conversation that meant the most to her came from an unexpected source. "Excuse me, are you Maria Santos?" Maria turned to see a young woman, probably in her early 20s, with bright eyes and a nervous smile. "I am. Can I help you?" "My name is Jennifer Kim. I'm a sophomore at the community college, and I've been thinking about applying to the fire academy. But everyone keeps telling me I'm too small, that I should consider other options." The young woman paused, studying Maria's face. "You're not much bigger than I am." Maria smiled, remembering her own doubts and the people who had tried to discourage her. "What do you think? Do you think you're too small?" "I used to think so, but watching the news coverage of the Riverside fire, seeing what you accomplished, I think maybe size isn't the most important thing after all." "It's not," Maria confirmed. "The most important thing is here," she pointed to her chest, "and here," she pointed to her head. "Heart and brains will get you further than muscle alone." Jennifer nodded eagerly. "Will you tell me about the fire academy? What should I expect?" As Maria began sharing her experiences and advice, she noticed they had attracted a small crowd of young women, all listening intently. Some were teenagers, others were college-aged, but they all shared the same hungry expression, the look of people who had been told they weren't suitable for something they desperately wanted to do. "The physical training is tough," Maria was saying, "but it's not impossible. You have to be creative, use technique instead of brute force, and never give up. Most importantly, you have to believe in yourself even when others don't." After the crowd dispersed, Lieutenant Cooper approached her. He looked different somehow, older maybe, but also more relaxed. "Santos, I owe you something I've never given you before." "What's that, Lieutenant?" "A full apology. When you first joined our crew, I thought you were a liability. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. You're not just a good firefighter, you're an exceptional one." Maria extended her hand, and Cooper shook it firmly. "We're good, Lieutenant." "We've always been good." Captain Rodriguez joined them, grinning broadly. "Santos, I have some news. The department is launching a new specialized rescue unit focusing on confined space and technical rescues. Given your unique skill set and proven abilities, you're being offered the position of team leader. Team leader. Maria was stunned. Leadership positions typically went to firefighters with much more seniority. You've earned it. Plus, after Riverside, you've got the respect of every firefighter in the department. People will follow you because they know you'll never ask them to do something you wouldn't do yourself. As the evening wound down, Maria found herself outside the auditorium with her parents. Her father wrapped her in a bear hug that lifted her off the ground despite her protests. Mija, your mother and I are so proud of you. You showed the whole world what we've always known, that you have the biggest heart of anyone we know. And the hardest head, her mother added with a laugh. When you decide to do something, nothing can stop you. Walking to her car later that night, Maria encountered one more person who had been waiting to speak with her. It was Dorothy Mason, the first person she had rescued from Riverside. I wanted to thank you personally, Dorothy said, her voice still carrying traces of the fear from that terrible night. But more than that, I wanted you to know something. My granddaughter saw you on the news tonight. She's 8 years old, and she told her mother that when she grows up, she wants to be just like the brave lady who saved Grandma. That's very sweet of her to say. You don't understand, Dorothy continued. My granddaughter has been told her whole life that she's too small for sports, too small for the school plays, too small for everything she wants to do. But tonight she saw that being small doesn't mean being weak. You gave her permission to dream bigger than her size. As Dorothy walked away, Maria felt the full weight of what had happened over the past 6 months. The Riverside fire had been about more than saving lives, though that was the most important part. It had been about changing perceptions, challenging assumptions, and proving that heroism couldn't be measured with a ruler or a scale. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah Chen. Saw the ceremony on TV. Proud to call you partner. See you at the station tomorrow. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fires to fight, new lives to save. The specialized rescue unit would push her skills in new directions and test her leadership abilities. But Maria Santos was ready for whatever came next. She had started her journey as a young woman who was constantly told she was too small to be a firefighter. Now she was a Medal of Valor recipient, a team leader, and an inspiration to others who had been told they weren't suitable for their dreams. More importantly, she had learned that the size of someone's courage, compassion, and determination couldn't be measured by their physical stature. On that November night at Riverside, when 27 lives hung in the balance, Maria Santos had proven that sometimes the smallest person in the room is exactly the right size for the job. As she drove home through the quiet city streets, Maria thought about the little girl at the fire safety demonstration who had wanted to be a firefighter just like her. Now there were dozens more, young women who saw her story and realized that their dreams weren't limited by their size. That legacy, Maria realized, might be even more important than the lives she had saved. Because every person she inspired to pursue their dreams, regardless of what others said about their suitability, had the potential to save lives of their own. The girl they had laughed at for being too small had become the woman who proved that heroism comes in all sizes. And that was a lesson the world would never forget.